Hey guys, I'm back with another video, and in this video I'm going to show you how to add Google login in a Blazor application in .NET 8. So this external login, sign in with Google in a Blazor application, okay? Without using ASP.NET Core identity. So it's very easy or kind of straightforward with the identity. If we have selected that individual account auth with while we are creating a Blazor application and it comes with ASP.NET Core identity, all that setup. So adding external logins to identity, it is a bit easier, but sometimes we don't want to include identity in our application. So I'm going to focus on this part when we are not using identity, and at that time if you want to use any external login. In this particular video we'll say sign in with Google, and if I got good response on this, so I will be planning other external logins as well. Login with Facebook, login with GitHub or Twitter or Apple, all the external logins. Okay, all right. And do let me know in the comment if you guys want to see a video for these external logins with identity, so I can plan a video for that as well. But because that is documented everywhere, there are, I think, a lot of videos. There must be a lot of videos, and that is fairly simple. That's why I'm not considering that right now. But if you guys are interested, do let me know in the comment. I will plan a video for that. All right. So for sign in with Google, first thing we need to create an app on Google. Okay, so here we'll say I'll simply search for Google Developers Console. Okay, so you can go to Google Developer Console, Google for Developers, or where is console? console.developers.google.com because we are going to use this third-party service, so we need to actually create an app and ask the client ID and client secret for our sign in with Google. I have this email. Okay, agree to continue. Now, first thing, now I'm in Google Developers Console. Here we need to create a project first. Okay, so new project. Let's say Blazor external auth. No organization. This is fine. Let me zoom it. It is creating a project. Project creation is done. This is the selected project right now. Now, first thing we need to set our OAuth consent screen. Let's go to this. Okay, here we'll select external because we are allowing outside of any organization. There is no Google Cloud service for any organization. I'm having this external only, so let's create it. Now it's ask us app information, so app name, it could be anything. Let's say the same thing, Blazor external auth. Support email, you could choose your own email. App logo, if you want to, you can add. All these are optional fields, so I'm not going to add all these. Authorized domains, I'm not going to add any of these. So just developer contact information, this is also an required field, so I'll fill this out. Save and continue. All right, now I'm in scopes, add or remove scope. So I'll go with the default. So the default scopes are simple username and email. These are the default, but you could add or remove scopes from here if you want to. You can select. So by default, it adds these email, profile, these two things basically. Or open ID as well. Let's have this. So you can play around with these. All these have serve different purpose, but we are good. Save and continue. Now we need to add a couple of test users. Whatever test user we want to test are this sign in with Google right now. So we'll simply add users. So these users, only these users will be able to allow it. I'll use the same email, my email only, which I'm using here. add and save and continue. Now this is just a simple summary. So we are okay with this. Now next thing we need to set our credentials. From here we'll get our client ID and client secret. Okay, so here we have this create credentials options created. API key, OAuth client ID, service account, help me to choose. So here we are going to use OAuth client ID. Selected. Application type. So what type of application this is? Right now we are working with Blazor. So this is a web application. We'll select web application. Name. The name could be anything, but I'll stick with the name I'm using. Blazor external auth. Okay. Authorize JavaScript domains. Now add URI for use with request from browser. If we are using some JavaScript logic to implement sign in with Google, then we need this authorize JavaScript origins. But right now we are not using it, so we'll skip it because with Blazor, we all these things, the sign in with Google complete flow, all this will be driven from server side only, so not directly from browser. Then comes authorized redirect URIs. So we'll add this. Now we'll create a project first to check what is the URL we are having. So we'll just take a pause here. We'll go to our Visual Studio. Here I'm in Visual Studio 2022. I'm creating a Blazor web app. Next, let's say Blazor external auth, and let's say I'll call it Google, and the solution name I'll just leave it with Blazor external auth only. Next, authentication type none, because I'm not using ASP.NET Core identity in this. So if you choose individual account, it will add identity that I don't need. Configure for HTTPS is fine. Interactive render mode, this is up to you, whatever interactive mode you want or you need in your application. So but this sign in flow, the sign in with Google, all this flow is going to be server side only. So no matter what render mode you choose, these pages or whatever this sign in with Google authentication flow, we will be using static server side rendering only, static SSR. Okay, so let's have none. Include sample pages, this is fine. Let's create this project. So it created project. All right, now we'll see the default URL. So this is going to, we are going to use this HTTPS profile. So this HTTPS profile, this is this one. So it is using this 7142. I'll simply copy this, go to the browser, add it here. You could add any URL and then you can also go to the profile and then you can change the URL if you want to, but I'm good with this. We need to modify it, but right now let's create it. Okay, we'll modify it because now in order to work with sign in with Google, we need to add one NuGet package. We'll go to manage NuGet packages, and here we need a package microsoft.asp.netcore.authentication.google, this one. Okay, so let's install it, apply, I accept. It got installed. We'll go to program.cs, and now we need to enable our authentication. Here I'll do builder.services.add authentication. On this we can add Google. Okay, now let's go to this add Google method. Here if we see, this is builder.add Google. I want to show you something, that's why I'm going to this route. So we'll check the last method, add OAuth. We have Google options and Google handler. If you go to Google options, I think that So this is the callback path slash sign in Google, which is kind of hard coded. Okay, so we need to use this as a callback URL, the redirect URI. Okay, so let's go back to our browser. Here, let's say edit this one. You could directly add it and at the beginning only. I just wanted to show you that this is how it works. So we have this localhost path, then slash sign in Google. When you deploy our app, then you will have the actual domain URL, whatever it is, https abcd.com slash sign in hyphen Google. This one. We'll save it. Now we are good. Let's go to program.cs, save. Now next thing is we need our client ID and client secret. So client ID is this one. To this client ID, we can copy this auth client ID, or maybe we can download auth client. Or let's go to edit. Here we will see our client ID. This is the client ID and client secret. This is the client secret. So we need these both. Okay. So first let's copy the client ID. We need to store this somewhere safely. So right now you could store these in maybe some config, environment variables, app settings, or user secrets. It's up to you where you are storing these. I'm going to store these in app settings. App settings.development. I'm having this here. So let me say then these setting names is up to you. You can name these whatever you want. I'll say authentication. Inside this, I'm going to create a Google key. Inside this, to group these basically. Here I'll say client ID. I'll paste this. Then I'll duplicate this. Then I'll say client secret and spelling mistake. So client ID and client secret. So client ID is this, and for client secret, let's go back to browser and we have this client secret. Let's copy it. Client secret, paste it, save it. Now we should be good. All right, now we are here in program.cs in this add Google. Now we will add a couple of things. If we see, we have this authentication scheme and then action of this configure options. Okay, so first is authentication scheme, which we are going to use with Google. So let's use the defaults only. So here we have Google defaults dot authentication scheme, and then here we could provide some Google options. And on this Google options, we will have our client ID and we'll have our client secret. Okay. Now we need to get these from our app settings. So we have authentication, Google, then client ID. So if you are familiar with how these app settings works, we can have authentication colon Google colon client ID. It will go to this section, or we could, if you are using options pattern, you can simply get these from options. Or there are a lot of different ways by which you can get this, but we'll use the simplest basic one. Where we'll say builder dot configuration. From here we could directly say authentication, this one, authentication, then colon, we'll go to Google, then colon, we'll go to this client ID. Now we have this client ID and we know this is not going to be null, so we can simply do this. Same thing for client secret. We just need to change the last piece, this client secret. Now we have client secret also. Now we are good with this basic setup. We save it. Now this is the basic simplest setup. It will have a couple of issues when we'll run it. I know because I have already tried it. So maybe we can simply go and then try fix those one by one, or maybe we can go beforehand So let's go the beforehand. So in add authentication, we need to set the default authentication scheme. For this, we can simply have a constant here. So we'll say const string, let's say auth scheme, which we are using. It could be anything. Let's say AP Google auth, something like this. And we can use this auth scheme here. And we'll be using it somewhere else as well. So let's better to create a constants file. So I'll create a class constants. I'll make it a static class. Inside this, I'll make public static, again one class to group it. Let's say auth only. Here I'll say public const string auth scheme. Okay, AP Google auth. It could be anything. The name does not matter, and we can use it. So it should be constants from our project .auth scheme. Copy. Now this is the default authentication. Now with Google, we want, when we are using this Google authentication, we want it to sign in using the default scheme which we are using on add authentication. Okay, so here on this Google options, we have one more option, that is sign in scheme. Okay, so with sign in scheme, we can use the same scheme. You should use this sign in scheme. Now this with add Google, we are just add authentication is to support authentication functionality in our application. Then this add Google, this will actually allow the sign in with Google, that external workflow, but we need to have some middleman here which will actually store the authentication information. For that, we are going to use cookies. So in between, we'll say add cookie, and with add cookie, we have a couple of overload methods. So we have one of these authentication scheme. So this is going to be our default authentication scheme. So we'll use this one only. Okay. And on this, now this is fine. This should work, but we can actually have some different cookie options as well if we want to. So I usually change the name of the cookie. So I'll say cookie options dot cookie dot name. So this name is also up to you. It could be anything. I'll say ap dot user, something like this. And now we are good. Our authentication, this basic setup is ready. We'll see if something is not working, then we'll simply work on that. But with the simplest form, it should work. Now we have our this setup ready. Now we need to enable the authentication in our HTTP request pipeline. So here we have HTTPS redirection, we have static files, anti-forgery. Maybe here only we'll say app.use authentication, and you could also enable authorization. Add authentication, sorry, use authentication, use authorization. And now program.cs setup is ready. Now we need some button or some page from where we'll initiate the sign in with Google functionality. Okay, for this I'm going to go to components, pages. Here I'll simply add a new Razor component. Let's say sign in with Google. It could be anything, name is up to you. And now I'm simply set up page URL for this. So @page, and here I'll say login, maybe -Google. Or now in this I don't need anything, or maybe I can just have initiating sign in with Google, although we are not going to see this thing. Now in this code block, first thing we will have our HTTP context. So in Blazor static SSR pages, we can get our HTTP context from this cascading parameter. So now we have HTTP context ready. Now we'll simply override our onInitialized or onInitialized async method. In here, what we'll do, we know we have this HTTP context. From this or from this, we don't need HTTP context. All right. So here, what we'll do, we have typed result or results which comes from minimal API. So now this is built in ASP.NET Core. So we can use type result or just results API. On this, we have this challenge method, which is for authentication challenges. Okay, it takes two parameters. One is authentication properties and second one is authentication schemes. Okay, so first one is authentication properties. So we need to set these auth properties equals new authentication properties from Microsoft ASP.NET Core authentication. And on this, we have a couple of different things, but we will set this redirect URI. This is required that when the sign in with Google is completed, where should it come to? Okay, after completing the sign in with Google workflow. So not directly from Google. So from Google, it will come to that sign in hyphen Google, which I showed you. After processing that URL, which will come from the package we have installed, we have a lot of logic. Microsoft has already done it. After performing that operation, it should come back to some URI, or that URI we are going to set it here. So for this, we'll create one more page here. So we'll say pages, Razor component, let's say after Google login, or maybe after login with Google. After login with Google, something, it could be anything. Sign in with Google, right? So better to rename it after sign in with Google. All right. Now here also the page URL, it could be anything, but I'll keep in sync. So I'll say this, or maybe let's copy this everything, paste it, and here we'll say after login Google, something like that. Here we will need HTTP context. Let's remove this thing. And right now this is not showing the colors. That means somehow this is not working, and I guess okay, now it picked up. All right, we are good. So this is the redirect URI which we need from sign in with Google. So here we'll set it / after login Google, and our authentication properties is done. All right, now typed results dot challenge. Here we'll set this auth properties, then comma, list of authentication schemes, and this is a list of strings. So we'll use collection expression here, and in here we'll set our authentication scheme which we are using with Google. So here we'll say Google defaults dot authentication scheme. Now we are good. Now it returns challenge HTTP result. So we can simply have this result, and then we will execute this result. So we'll say execute async, and it needs HTTP context. We can pass this HTTP context which we are getting as a cascading parameter. So we'll add this and we can await it. And now this is fine. After performing this operation, it will come to this page. It will initiate this execute async. It will go to the Google. We'll allow it from there. It will come back to sign in Google, that default endpoint. It will process that. It will set everything. After that, it will come back to this after login Google page, which we have here. Okay. So here also we'll say override on initialized async, and we'll do some post processing here. Okay, here let's do this. Let's simply check if we are getting, if this is authenticated here or not. HTTP context dot user dot identity dot is authenticated. Let's have this simple check. I'll simply have a breakpoint here, or let's say add a breakpoint here as well. Save everything, and now let's try it. But before that, this slash login Google. Let's add link in our layout nav menu. In here at the very bottom, the last link, we'll do this href login Google, and here we'll say sign in with Google, and let's run this. We have set up everything right. Let's run it. And what happens? Not right. Unable to find the required service. Please add all the required service by add authorization. Okay, we can remove it, or maybe we can simply add authorization here. Builder dot services dot add authorization. Run it, and we have our app running here. If I'll say sign in with sign in Google, so login Google, you see after reaching that page it went to Google. From here we can select this, continue. It came back to our after login Google page, and here if we check, it came inside this. That means now the user is authenticated. And if we check this identity, okay, let's do this. Let's http context dot user. Let's add a quick watch on this. Here we can see we have claims, 5 claims actually. We have one identity with the name this, claims this. If we expand this identity, I don't know if you can see it. It is very small. I don't know how to make it bigger, but this is authentication type is Google. Claims, we have 5 claims. Name is this Prince Whitey. Name, claim type, role, claim type. And if we expand these claims, we have all these claims. So name, given name, surname, email address, name identifier, we have all these things. That means this flow is completed now. Now, in general, or in most of the cases, after coming from Google, we now know who the user is from Google. So this user is authenticated. But we also store this user's information in our system, in our database. So there should be some user who is connected or mapped with this Google user. Okay, so that means whatever email ID we got, in most of the cases email is the main username, which is unique. So we got this username email. On the basis of this email, if this is the first request, we can directly register this user in our database. And if that you already exist in our database, then we will allow user to sign in, automatically sign into our system. This is the flow which we do. So for this case, what I'll do, I'll simply show you how to get, or maybe how to modify this existing identity when we do this. So let's say we will register or log in this Google user into our system. Okay. So in our system, there should be some user ID associated or mapped with this Google ID, something like this, Google ID or email. It could be anything. In most of the cases, we'll use email. Okay. So here, what we'll do, we can simply say the email ID. We can simply get it. We just checked, right? We missed it. Okay, we'll check it again. What was the claim name? Sign in with Google. It's not right. So we came to after login Google because we are already logged in. So we are okay. We will come here. And here if we check identity and name claim type, role claim type is fine, claims, and this email address. The type is this. We'll simply copy this. This should be same as, or I don't know if this is same or not. If we say claim types dot email, is this same? schemas.xmlsoap.org ws200505 identity claims email address. Yes, it is same. So we can use this claim types.email to get the email. All right, cut it, stop it, and we'll say what email from Google claim, something like this. Okay, and here we can say this http context dot user dot claims dot first dot default dot first c dot type equals claim types dot email dot value. Now this value, it should always be there, but if somehow it is not there, we can simply have check this, and then we can have some additional logic to this string dot null white space this thing. If this is, let's say, null or white space, we'll simply say handle this. Now if this is not thing, now that means we have just written. Now if we have everything, we have this email, then we'll say register this user with this email into database if not exist already, or log in with this email. Okay, now we have this thing. Now after that, what we'll do, let's say or let's say I'll say int user id equals, right now I'm going to have it some random thing, so let's say 123. Here we'll say get this from database on the basis of that email id. Okay, now we have this user id. Now what we need to do, we need to store this user id, or maybe add this user id to claims. User id to existing http context identity claims. This thing we need to do additional. So here what we'll do, we'll simply get a copy of claims. So we can say claim array, then here we can say dot dot from this http context dot user dot claims. We have all the claims, we simply spread those out, and after this we'll add one claim, which will be this claim, this user id. For this we can maybe go to our constant, or we can modify the name identifier if we want to name identifier or sub claim. So in that case we just need to remove that. We will not add it with this, we'll skip that, and then we'll add the value for that. But in this case I'll do external things, so I'll say public static class say claims, and here I'll say public const string user id, and this name is up to you, you can name it whatever you want. So I'll have this user id, or let's say just user id. Now here I'll say claim, the name would be constants dot claims dot user id, and the value will be this user id, dot toString. Now our new claims are ready. Let's say call it new claims only. Okay, now from this new claims we need to create our new identity. So here we'll say var new identity equals, here we'll say new claims identity. Here first thing we can add identity and claims. We don't have identity, we have list of claims and authentication type. List of claims, we have this new claims, and then authentication type. Now initially when we were doing this sign in with Google, we use this Google default authentication scheme because that is what Google will need. But now it came back to our application. In our application, we are using our cookies authentication. So in program.cs, we will use a default scheme, which is this. With add authentication and add cookie, we are using this constants auth.auth scheme. This is the one which we'll use here. So we'll create identity with this scheme. Now our new identity is ready. On the basis of this new identity, we'll create a new claims principal. New principal equals new claims principal, and we'll provide this new identity. Okay, now we are good. Now new principal, we need to replace the existing principal, existing identity from this HTTP context. So the best way to do it, we can simply re-sign in this new principal. Okay, so here we'll say await HTTP context, await HTTP context dot sign in async. Okay, and in sign in async we can provide principal, authentication properties, scheme, and principal. We are going to use this one, the default scheme. This is this one. I like to add the explicit, then claims principal, and this is a new principal here. And now we are good. Now from here we are free to send it or return this user to anywhere, wherever we want. We can redirect user. So from here I'll simply say return. In Blazor we can use our navigation inject navigation manager to redirect it to anywhere. So we will say navigation manager dot navigate to, let's redirect it to home page only. It was a lot of setup, but now we are good. Here we'll say redirecting or setting up, you could name it setting up the state, something like this. Although it is not going to run, it will never run basically this thing, because we are doing everything in on initialized async only, and it is on server side only, so it will not run. I'm just showing you, so we'll modify it. So now everything is fine, we are good to use this. Now how will we use this? The usual way by which we use in Blazor basically. So let's do this. Let's go to the where is our nav menu? Here we have this sign in with Google, right? With this, or maybe in main layout, we'll simply display username before this body. Okay, so here let's do this. Here I'll use a authorize view. So we can simply add this Microsoft ASP.NET Core Components authorization in our underscore imports.razor, so that it can be used throughout our Razor pages. And authorize view. Inside this, we can have authorized when user is authorized. Here we can simply say h5 hello and then user name. Now with this, by default the name is the username, basically we could use this. So from this authorized view and authorized, it gives us a special variable which is @context, and on this we can access these things. So we can access user dot, we can access identity dot, we can access name, and now we are good. We know that this will never be null because we are in authorized state. So hello, this name, and we are good. And we can also display our maybe user ID if we want to show that user ID is also coming here. Here we can simply say context dot user dot claims dot first or default. Here we'll say c dot type equals constants dot claims dot user id, and we'll simply access the value here. Save it, save everything. Now we should be good. Okay, let's try to run it now. And we got one error. Invalid operation exception. Authorization requires cascading parameter of type task of authentication state. Okay, now because we are using this authorized view, now it should be changed with so we have two approaches. Either we can go to routes.razor and we can wrap this entire thing in that cascading authentication state, or we can simply go to program.cs, and here we can say builder.services.add cascading authentication state. Both of these are same. So if we can add it here, or maybe we can add the cascading authentication state as a root, as a wrapper of our the routes.razor page. Now it is saying something else. Invalid operation action. No service of type components authorization authentication state provider has been registered. Okay, so let's fix this as well. Okay, so for this, in our program.cs only, we'll provide builder.services.add scoped for authentication state provider. Authentication state provider, we'll say you should use server authentication state provider, which is kind of a default implementation for Blazor web apps for static server side rendering, static SSR. All right, let's try it out now. Okay, it is here. We can see Prince YT, but we cannot see user ID. That's because we added it later. Right now it is getting it from the previous version, we could say. Right now we don't have logout functionality. We'll do that, but let's go to application tab, and here we should see our cookie, this .ap.user, which we created. So let's delete this cookie, and if we refresh it now, we'll see just hello world without that name and all that. Now sign in with Google, and now we can see it went, and because we already authorized it, now it is directly using this hello this and user ID 123. That means it came back, it applied our logic, and we can see this thing. Now if I refresh it, we should see this same thing. Okay, now you can have the same authorized not authorized logic. You can have logout and login functionality and all that stuff. Now there is one more piece of thing which I want to show you. What if I cancelled it? When I say cancelled, let me, right now it is directly using it. Let's try to remove this auth. How to remove it? I don't know. Let me try to remove the allowed app. This allowed app from Google side, so that it again goes to that Google, that auth consent screen. Okay, let me try to figure out how to remove that allowed authentication, allowed consent. So it is myaccount.google.com/connections. So third party apps and services. Right now this is the thing which is sign in with Google. So we'll simply go here, delete all connections, confirm. You are no longer connected to this thing. Okay, now if we try to do this, let's first delete the cookie, and let's refresh this page. Okay, we don't have it. If we say sign in with Google, it came here. We select it, and from here, instead of continue, what if I cancel it? So you see, When I'm canceling it, it is showing this error page. And if you see the URL, this is slash sign in Google, then error access code and whatever it is. So this is not what we want. In this case also, we want to handle this, right? So for this handling, oh, where is Visual Studio? Stop it. Inside this add Google, where we are configuring our Google options. Here we'll say Google options dot access denied path. Now it could be anything. So here we can say, let's say external slash external login denied. It could be anything. It's up to you. We just need to create this page. In pages, add new razor component, and here we could say external login denied, and we'll have just at the rate page with this URL. Login denied. Okay, save everything and let's try to run it again. Sign in with Google. We are here. Let's try to cancel it. And you see login denied our page. So we are good with this. And if we go again, select this time, continue. We are good. We have our username, we have our user ID which we are setting. Ideally, you will get it from your database, from your mapping and all that stuff. So we are good with this. So this is how how can we implement this external login using sign in with Google with our Blazor web app. It will be applicable for all Blazor web apps. Blazor web app without any interactivity, interactive server, interactive WebAssembly, interactive auto for all versions of Blazor. All right. Now, one more thing which I wanted to point out here. So this sign in with Google page and after sign in with Google page, these two pages, if we see all our logic is in on initialized or on initialized async only, and we are processing the request. If we go to the sign in with Google page, here we are just setting auth properties and we are kind of, we could say, redirecting it to the external sign in with Google page. We are not doing anything here. That means we are not rendering this page. We are not rendering anything. Then after completing that authentication flow with Google, it comes back to this after login page. Here also, if we see, we are having on initialized async, and in this we are just checking if this is authenticated, and after that we are just modifying our claims and then navigating to the home page. That means these two components, we are using these components, but these are not something which we are displaying on the UI, right? So instead of using these as Blazor components or routable page components, it would be good if we could move these away from these Blazor's pages or Blazor components to minimal API endpoints. So because Blazor is Blazor web app is a part of ASP.NET Core application, minimal API is by default in ASP.NET Core application. So we can have these things directly in our minimal API because we don't need any UI for these two things. All right. So let's quickly do this. So here, what we will do, we can go to our program.cs. We can directly have these here, or if you want to, you can create a new class or folder and then class. Here I'll say simply sign in with Google endpoints. Okay. And maybe we can create this static class, and here we can create it as an extension method on app. So public static I endpoint route builder and point route builder, and here we'll say map sign in with Google endpoints with this I endpoint route builder, and we'll just call it app only, and we'll return app. Now on this app we will define two methods. Okay, one will be for the initial app dot map get. So for sign in with Google, this thing. Now log in Google, maybe to show it that we are using it differently. I'm just appending API to this. You're not bound to do this, but I have shown you both the ways. You can either have this if you want to display something else in between, or you want to handle something which comes directly in Blazor's context. You can use these components, and if that is not something you want to do, you can just have these minimal API endpoints. In this case you don't need to add these if you are using only one. I'm just adding these API so that we know that this is from API and these are directly from components. All right, so this is this, and after that inside this, if we see, we need to have our HTTP context. Do we really need to have HTTP context? So we needed this because we are executing manually this type results challenge, but from minimal API we can actually directly return typed result or results.challenge. We can directly return it and it will simply process it. We don't need to do this. So that means we don't need HTTP context there, but we need this auth properties. And then we need this challenge line. All right. Now our login Google, this one is ready. Now let's define the second one. So for this redirect URI, we'll use /API/ after login Google. So same thing. So here we'll say app.mapget, then this URL. And with this, we need HTTP context because we are playing around with HTTP context. Okay. So here we need HTTP context. So we'll simply inject this HTTP context here. So we'll say async HTTP context, and here we will have the same logic what we were having in this on initialized async. So let's copy everything, paste it, and HTTP context, this is this lowercase h. So HTTP context will replace all. Then navigation manager.navigate to /. So this was Blazor component, but now we have this minimal API endpoint. So here we'll simply say return typed result dot redirect, and we can redirect it to just / the same thing. There we had it with /. Now this handle this. So here we will have something else. It's up to us what we are doing. From here we could say type result dot unauthorized or forbidden or anything. Now we will have a problem if we have multiple different types of returns. It does not directly works. Let's have the results. This is fine. When I say not work, not like this, unauthorized. Now if it came directly outside of this, if it didn't work, let's move it to outside of this. Now we are good. If you want to use typed result, then it will return two different type of output. So this direct delegate does not work. In that case you need to create a method and then directly use that method here. So that way it works. This is minimal API basics. All right. So we have our minimal API endpoints for this login. Let's use this in our program.cs. Here we'll say app dot map. What was the name? Map sign in with Google endpoints. Map sign in with Google points. And we are good. Let's move it here. And before app.run. And now we are good. Let's try it out. By default, it will use the Blazor components. So we need to just have to set the initial page. So in layout, in main layout, not main layout, nav menu.razor. Here we have sign in with Google. So here I'm going to copy it. This time I'll say /API/this. And with this I'll say sign in with Google. Here we'll say API. Save it. So make these distinguish that this is different. This is using minimal API. This is using direct component. Run it. Right now it has this sign in with Google API. It came here. We don't know if it worked or not. Let's go here. Let's delete the cookie. Refresh the page. We are good. Let's use sign in with Google API. And you see it came back and now we have all these details. So same thing we can check by removing this. I'll refresh it. Again I have this. I'll simply remove this. Confirm. I'll come here and just delete the cookie again. Refresh it. We are good. Sign in with Google. We are again here. From here also if we cancel it, we should see access login denied. Again, continue. This time it should be able to log in. All right. So it's up to you if you are using components or you are using this API. All right. So that's all for this video. This is how we can integrate sign in with Google in our Blazor apps. So that's all for this video. Please like this video, share this video, subscribe my channel. I'll be back soon with some other cool video. Till then, bye bye. Happy coding.